Kind of ironic that I'm sitting here in a foreign language class because I'm probably an example of a guy that spent most of his academic career running from a language requirement. So I took a lot of Latin and classical Greek and Latin, which to me were my, at least at that time, Scarsdale allowed you to have a spoken language exemption if you could have some proficiency in the written classics. So anyway, and the real irony is that I ultimately ended up moving to the other side of at least Europe into Russia and spend my everyday more focused on markets around the world than I do on our markets here. Real quickly, by day, I run a hedge fund that invests in emerging markets. And emerging markets, for you folks, the definition is really, it's both an economic one. It's countries that don't have the sophistication and the depth of their capital markets, but of their macro economies. It's becoming but it's countries like China, like Russia, like India. There's an expression that people refer to, at least in the Wall Street world, called the BRIC markets. And the BRIC markets is essentially Brazil, Russia, India, China. And the reason they call them the BRIC markets is because literally they are kind of the foundation, the bricks of the next wave of global economies. The things that I think people tend to lump them together for is kind of the primary reason why I'm so fascinated with these markets and why I think they're probably markets I think you all will be looking a lot more at in some level than you might even be this market here, is that the emerging middle class is in these countries really the story you're trying to invest in. So the guy in India who's trading in his bicycle, the grown man in India is trading in his bicycle for his first car. There's a company called Tata Motors, which is the Ford Motors of India on some level, who's selling a car called the Nano, and it's a $2,000 car, and it's an affordable first car for that middle class. It's the guy in Brazil, the family in Brazil buying their first home for $50,000. It's the well-educated but maybe historically not accessible to the internet guy in the Chinese provinces that is now as fluent and connected online as maybe you are here, but 2 years ago wouldn't have known what to do with an internet connection. So for me, the exciting thing is this is emerging markets, which are all of these countries that are not basically Western Europe, the United States, Japan, Canada, Australia. Is pretty much everybody else, and in many cases these are countries that were really left behind by the developed world. And to me, the story to just maybe take away from this is I think that these are countries that you're going to find are going to be much more important players, not only because they're the ones that have all the oil, they're the ones that have all the metals and the diamonds and the things that the world seems to be fighting over and in scarcity of, but they're the ones that historically in this country we've had our ability to pretty much force, require them, massage our diplomacy with them to get them to do things that we wanted to do in the United States. And I think that one of the themes you're going to see changing is that the United States' influence, the sphere of influence, especially within these countries, is changing by the day. And I think we are having to learn how to be more diplomatic, and we're having to learn how to be a little bit more knowledgeable that there are other both cultures and economies that view themselves as important as we do, and actually now can go to the World Bank or the IMF or sit at the table of every major economic gathering, and in many cases have a much better economic story to tell than the United States. So that's a little bit about what I do. By day, as I said, I'm a hedge fund manager, which sounds kind of glamorous. The hedge fund world is often portrayed in a way that guys are throwing around billions of dollars. Many are, and some of my classmates here from Scarsdale '84 are probably the guys that really should be here talking about that. Eric Mendich is a guy that lived up down the street from me. He was the first partner at Goldman Sachs, the youngest partner, I should say, ever at Goldman Sachs. But when he left Goldman, people threw billions of dollars at him to start his own hedge fund. But I'm investing in companies in Brazil and Russia, in Mexico and Chile and China. And we have investors that give us money. In many cases, the people that invest with us are what we call institutional investors. So not probably your parents or people like that, but more maybe the Yale Endowment, maybe the Scarsdale Teachers and Firemen's Pension Association. But we're trying to get the big tickets. We're trying to get people that have $10 and $20 million as opposed to the people that have $20,000. The other interesting thing about what I'm doing is, though, that all of this expertise in living in Russia, but hopefully being a pretty normal American guy, has had me get a lot more exposure on CNBC, which is, for many of you are aware, it's kind of the financial markets news station that just about everybody follows. And I'm on a show every night called Fast Money, which is I kind of call it the NFL Today of markets. I mean, it's really what happened that day. Maybe a Jets fan or a Giants fan, but at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, you kind of want to know what the Raiders did, and you want to know what happened in some of these other games. That's what we do. So in other words, I'm talking about a lot of stuff that probably professionally, I don't know with the kind of detail that I do the stuff that I'm doing all day long, but I'm in markets, I'm conversational on it, people want to hear what traders think, and that's what this show is. And the real goal for me is actually we're building a show, though, dedicated to emerging markets, so dedicated to these markets that are my expertise. And so we've started to do that. The show's called Trading the Globe, and I'm the host of that show, and we're hopefully going to make this a weekly show going forward. But it's been interesting because my capital markets and financial markets experience has found me probably more well known on some level walking down the street for the guy that's on Fast Money. But it's really, to me, about taking my passion for international finance, and it's allowed me to do some pretty interesting things. So that's a little bit of an overview. I could talk for hours, but I don't know if people have questions, if people want to know how it's like to live in Moscow when the world was crumbling in 1998, or what it's like to be talking about stuff on TV, whatever. So, yes.
It's so random, but did you experience white nights?
Did I experience white nights? That's not random. That's a great question. White nights, for people that don't know, is basically the northern hemisphere. It's a season in the summertime when it stays light 24 hours a day. So especially in St. Petersburg, which is the northern part, or Leningrad and Stalingrad are the old names that we gave them back in Soviet days. But St. Petersburg is really I would argue, kind of the European capital of Russia. And it's a beautiful, beautiful city. It's a very classical city. It's more like a Prague or Paris than it is where Moscow is more like a London or even a Frankfurt, which are more modern cities, because they've had to rebuild. But White Nights is a special time, and you go up there and you basically are able to hang out at 3 in the morning, and it's bright as day, and you can see sights, and it's a fun time of year. Yeah. So I have, and in fact, I try to do it once a year, but sometimes I can't do that. Yes.
What do you think is the most interesting part of living in a different country?
Yeah, it's clearly getting to know that culture, and one of the things that obviously for Russia, people in this country, we've always had this anxiety / misunderstanding / perceptions, these Cold War era ideas, which the Cold War is probably not something anybody really knows a whole lot about in this class on some level. But it's definitely digging down and making friends. It's learning the customs. It's learning, when Principal Clem tried to shake my hand through the door of his office to my office, to just the hallway I was standing outside. I said, no, that's bad luck, because that's a superstition that, all the Russians, every time I go into business meetings, my first couple months in Moscow, I'd shake somebody's hand, and as I shook their hands through the door, they looked horrified and, in fact, ran in the other direction. But I mean, it's learning some of the quirky cultural, social things, as well as obviously understanding really how they make their decisions, because as obvious as it seems, both in just the the general workplace, a Russian classroom would operate very differently than a U.S. classroom would. And so I think those to me are the greatest things about it. And the more you can acclimate to those things, the better they will accept you, the more successful I think you'll be in an environment like that.